Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to another video. Today, or rather yesterday, marks patch day, and rather a significant patch day because this most recent patch is the finale of Season 1 of The Living World. This was a long time in the making. ArenaNet announced, I guess shortly before Christmas, that they were going to do this idea of seasons with The Living World, you know, specific stories and arcs that are going on, which I'm a massive, massive advocate for. And this patch is the finale of Season 1. It's wrapping up everything we saw to do with Scarlet, who has pretty much dominated the content of The Living World for the past year, and it is also setting up the future story of Season 2. So to let everybody know right now at the start of the video, there will be spoilers here, big spoilers. However, I'm also going to drop wholesale, like, the really significant ending cutscene into this video, so don't be too worried about spoilers. I'll take you through it step by step, and you'll get to see the cutscene for yourself, so it'll be almost like you're experiencing it in-game, but there will be spoilers here, so if you really want to play it for yourself, then go off and play it for yourself. I will also be talking about the other stuff going on with the patch, which largely, I have to be honest, okay, the story stuff was pretty good, and we'll get to that. The rest of the patch kind of frustrates me, kind of annoys me. I would say I spent maybe 3 hours to 3.5 hours completing this content. Not a particularly long patch. I don't have 100% completion. I don't have all the achievements yet. It's not a particularly long patch, especially compared to previous ones. But I spent maybe 3 hours and a good 2 hours at the very least of that, I was doing stuff I didn't want to do. Zerging around, killing bosses for achievements because of the way that they've designed the content, which is really frustrating to me. I'm going to be cutting, therefore, a lot of that footage out. I filmed everything I did for this patch, and so much of it is just irrelevant nonsense that was really annoying to play. So let's get into that, exactly what's going on mechanically. Last patch set up the idea of Lion's Arch being attacked by Scarlet Briar, setting up the idea of the Breachmaker, her giant drill airship, and the patch was largely focused on escorting refugees out of the city. We had some specific events in there, like escorting the ogre and the mowers and the lighthouse keeper and the black lion Dolyax. All these events are now gone. You can now go into Lion's Arch all the time. Last patch it would like only be open for a 40-minute window or so. Now Lion's Arch is sort of becoming a regular map again in the world. You can go there whenever you like, and sort of this mini game style thing where you're trying to rescue citizens before the miasma levels get too high is gone, and the events where you're escorting people out is gone. Last patch was themed about getting people away from the city. Now we're pushing back in and retaking the city. How exactly this opened up, I don't think they explained in the story. Maybe I'm missing it somewhere, but last patch they set up the whole point was that the entire city was becoming poisoned, that the miasma levels were getting super high, and this was the reason why we couldn't attack Scarlet. So getting around the miasma level surely should be a big part of the plot, why we can now finally attack Scarlet, and as far as I'm aware, they didn't tell us why that happened, so it's just this weird thing we have to gloss over. It's like, oh yeah, Scarlet brought loads of miasma, but not enough miasma to completely finish her plans, which was like a major flaw in her design, but we'll ignore that, that's totally fine. So this patch we can go back into Lion's Arch. It's not necessarily gated to get into Lion's Arch anymore, but if you want to get into like the final dungeon instant story stuff, it is still time gated. It happens at the top of every hour. I didn't realise this going into the patch. I mean, I knew some stuff about what the patch was going to contain before playing it, but I didn't want to spoil a bunch of stuff for myself, so I just went in totally raw, like you would expect most players to do, and tried to play. This turned out to be really, really frustrating for me, because I didn't know it was only at the top of the hour. I went into Lion's Arch, saw all these weird icons and things going on, tried to deal with it and figure out what was going on, ultimately couldn't, and then basically was forced to spend the first hour walking around just doing Zergy content, killing bosses. So what ArenaNet did was they didn't just remove the escort events that are in Lion's Arch, but they replaced them with a bunch of new champions that continuously respawn, and these are supposedly like Scarlet's greatest, you know, generals and things within her alliances that we've never heard of before, but like there's one for each alliance, and you're meant to be going around killing these things, but literally they are only there to give you something to do so that you can get achievements. Sometimes it's just a matter of killing the boss, sometimes it's a matter of killing the boss, but with doing something extra at the same time too. And largely, they're just really frustrating. I think that Zergy patches are worthwhile and fun, but only if they're quite rare. Now we've sort of had 2 in a row, and it's grating on me. Like, they'll add the Molten boss is invulnerable consistently unless you pull him out of a specific area, but you can't trust 20 to 50 other random guys around you to be able to do that. Some of the bosses are completely broken. One of them, the Aetherblade guy, has got these stacks of a shield on him that is almost impossible to remove in a Zerg, so you just have to spend ages slamming your head against this brick wall trying to kill him. And I'm doing this all the while just trying to Zerg around in Lion's Arch, desperately trying to get into the story. This is the finale, and ArenaNet were like weirdly gating people out, and I just found it one of the most frustrating things I've ever had to do. Worse, when the hour finally did come up, the way they have it set up is 3 large watchwork bosses spawn across the map, one representing each of the Asuran colleges: statics, dynamics, synergetics, and you have to kill them all within 12 minutes, with an additional achievement to kill them within 6 minutes, which is really difficult to do as well, which is actually fine. But you're meant to kill them all within 12 minutes, and the overflow I was in was unable to do it. And so I had to wait another hour after this, even after going through all of that, killing more bosses, and just generally being a little bit ticked off. That was largely my experience of the patch, and I've got to share it with you guys because it was kind of irritating. I hope that they don't do something like that again. I can appreciate the idea that it has to happen at the top of every hour, they have to do it at specific times, so that you do get this big Zerg feeling, right? Everybody congregates to that one moment, and then you get this big epic encounter towards the end, but it was pretty irritating for me. So, let me complain about the Zergy stuff at the start no longer. It's fairly rewarding to do at any rate. Eventually, I got to the situation where we had the 3 giant watchwork knights up. We killed them within enough time, got all 3 buffs from them, and this now allows you to enter the Breachmaker. I will add, there is a way to get into the Breachmaker early if you wish, which I did find out during these hours where I was forced to sit about and wait. But if you, and the method of doing this is by going to one of the teleporters into the airship, but while using one of the new back pieces, the watchwork back pieces. And the idea is sort of you're tricking the ship into thinking you're maybe a watch knight or something, you can get in. However, if you do this, you do miss out on some elements of the story. Nothing super huge, but if you have been following it on loyally from, you know, this time last year, you will want to get the full picture. And so I suppose like many other people as well, opted not to do this. So, I finally legitimately got into the Breachmaker, and this is where the interesting stuff begins to happen. So, take a knee. You're teleported into a large platform way above Lion's Arch. I think, mechanically speaking, it's not actually the same map as regular Lion's Arch. Perhaps it is. But as far as you're going to be concerned, you're basically in a dungeon. Imagine this to be a dungeon, except 150 players, and also imagine it to be a fairly short dungeon. In fact, imagine it to be a dungeon where you start off in the final boss room. It's a large arena-type area where you've got a massive hologram of Scarlet to destroy. There are various mechanics here. Basically, you've got to run around the room collecting colours. Once you've got all 3, you can damage it. When it gets to a certain threshold of health, it will split into 3 smaller holograms, and then you have to destroy all of those. But every time you destroy one of those, they further split into a bunch of small holograms, so you've got to like do it in a certain order and get the ad control going well. Then the giant hologram comes again, you lure all of the ads in the room into the center and blow it up. Mechanically, I think it's got some pretty interesting things going on there. Scarlet Briar as well, you can see in the distance of the Breachmaker, you know, toying with all of the machines, presumably controlling the hologram, and even coming down and participating in the fight herself every now and then. And it's kind of a cool fight. It's not a difficult fight. It's nowhere near, like, running to Quattle or the Worm. There isn't really much of a measure of difficulty. It is time-gated, just like the event to actually get inside the Breachmaker, so you could, in theory, fail. But I suppose if you've done the event to get inside the Breachmaker, there's very little chance you'll fail once you're actually in there. But basically, it's a large boss fight. The one super cool thing about this boss fight is Helatron's presence. You guys might remember last patch, they set up this idea that the Seraph was still hounding him and still blaming him for the attack on Divinity's Reach last summer, and they're trying to arrest him, and he's trying to prove, no, I'm not a bad guy, no, I'm not a bad guy. And you could see him last patch trying to buy from Evan Nashblade like a suit of armor and an energy absorber, as he called it, and everyone was like, why, what exactly is Helatron doing with that? Well, it turns out his plan was, and maybe this isn't as cool as it could have been, but his plan was during this boss fight, he is present in the battle, and if you die, you can be rezzed by Helatron. He wanders about rezzing people at like a really quick speed, speed. And I had like a really cool moment, I've got to admit, and it might be there in the footage on the video, where I died and I start getting rezzed almost instantly. I'm like, what's rezzing me? And I realise it's Helatron. That's so cool. I got rezzed by Captain Magnus during the event's last patch as well at one point. I love that, when key characters actually come over to res you up. Very, very cool. And that's basically Helatron's involvement. Once the giant hologram dies, somehow this seems to do a lot of damage to Scarlet as well, and she's mortally wounded from it. And that's actually quite serious. That's quite significant, because the way that the following stuff in the story functions all assumes Scarlet is already mortally wounded, and yet there's no real moment where we, as a giant 100-man Zerg, actually fight her. You kill her hologram, and then she's crippled and wounded. And there is this very cinematic and cool scene where you're playing the game trying to kill her, and you can do damage to her, but she's like slowly limbering along with like this swarm of players around her. But she manages to get away from you. I think that maybe their original plans may have been that you kill the hologram, and then you have like a big Zerg encounter with Scarlet after that perhaps could have been cut. In any case, let's just assume now that she was injured somehow during the hologram fight, and this is now going to be significant for the future stuff in the story. Mechanically, at this point, you now get the option to enter a solo instance. This isn't like a 5-man dungeon. This isn't anything difficult necessarily that you're going to be going into. It's a story instance, and you can be the only player in there. Basically, some doors open up to follow Scarlet Briar deeper inside the Breachmaker. At this point, too, Helatron has a little bit of a conversation with Ellen Keel, who came up with you as well through the portal, and she says, oh, hey, Helatron, basically, you're a good guy. He says, yay, my mission was successful, this is awesome. And then Ellen Keel and Helatron actually turn around and leave and go back down. Again, that's something I feel like they gloss over. You know, Ellen, without a word or reason why, she decides, I'm not going to fight Scarlet, whatever, I'll just go back down. So they randomly decide to leave the airship, and you get a very short period of time to decide, right, what am I going to do? Am I going to go deeper in the Breachmaker, or for some stupid reason log out for the night? So you head inside the door, and now you're basically in an entirely new, unique instance where you're looking at the inside of this big metallic airship. It's not that big in there, practically speaking. It's basically a small pathway with a circular room at the bottom of it. But visually and design-wise, it's kind of nice. It's also the site of a lot of new music. While I was frustratedly zerging around on the ground, I was kind of getting annoyed, thinking to myself, oh, there's this stupid same old combat music all the time. But when you finally get into the Breachmaker, it's really, really carefully and specifically tailored, both in terms of what the NPCs say and the timing of everything, as well as the music, to what's actually happening in the story. So as stuff progresses, it really is quite a treat if you turn the music up for the first time ever, if you haven't in a really long time, because it does add a lot more impact into what you're going to see. Inside there, on the path, in front of you, you see Rox with her pet Frostbite, you see Bram, you see Marjorie, and you see Lady Casimir. 5 characters, including the pet, I suppose. And these characters, including you, are the heroes that will end this story, basically. This is the cast. As you walk down, Casimir sort of starts hiccuping a lot and saying, oh, Marjorie, what's going on? And she's hiccuping. That's actually a really nice touch. I don't know whether you guys realise, but they have established over previous patches that whenever Lady Casimir gets scared, she has this quirk about her where she's constantly hiccuping. And she's doing that here. That was a really cool, small thing in the story that I love to see, that they're actually honouring, and it sets the tone a bit. And Marjorie, of course, is very confident. She said, don't worry, I've arrested many criminals like Scarlet Briar in my time. And of course, Rox is here. Her motivation for being here, if she kills Scarlet, she gets into Ritlock's warband. Bram is a Norn, and as a Norn, he has to do anything for a legend. And there, ahead of all of the characters, in her control room, you can see Scarlet Briar. But as I explained before, for some strange reason, she's mortally wounded, and she is basically in down state. Now, she's down, but she's certainly not out. Even in down state, she puts up quite a bit of a fight. As you walk close to her, she starts goading you, and we get the first of, I believe it's like 3 cutscenes, okay? This cutscene is kind of crappy. I didn't enjoy this cutscene that much. Here's basically what happens in this cutscene. Scarlet says, oh, don't you want to know why I did it? And like, this is the climax of the story, where in any story, this would be the moment where the characters say, fine, indulge us. And, you know, the evil villain gets to have their big speech or something. But no, not in Guild Wars 2. This wasn't like one of the main things a lot of players really wanted, was it? No, in Guild Wars 2, Bram, who I guess it makes sense for Bram to do this since he is the Norn, Bram immediately says, says, no, we don't care, it doesn't matter. That's right, everybody, the writers are telling you, it doesn't matter what she was doing, it's over now anyway. What? I mean, obviously the writers did try to add a lot more story in there and explain to us her motivations, but if they feel like giving us, like, Scarlet's lair and that minor stuff in one of the earlier of these 4 patches was enough, I think they're sorely mistaken, and I hope in future seasons they do give us more information, because it's certainly not. There's still more than enough that I think we deserve to know about Scarlet Briar. There's so much more that we could have got out of her character, that we could have heard her say and admit and talk in person about these things she's had filling her head, but no, we don't get that. Bram just steps forward and says, no, it's over now anyway. And then so Scarlet then says quite openly, Tyria will bow before a new master. And then Bram has this kind of corny line saying, oh, we're Tyrians, we don't like being pushed around, you know, it's all very cartoony. She has an insane laugh and then starts coughing at the end of it because she's wounded, which I actually thought was quite well voice acted. And she says, what are you going to do, just throw me in jail? Which is a pretty hilarious idea. If you probably ask some goody-two-shoes characters of the way this story could go, where people do just try to lock up Scarlet Briar. But Marjorie steps forward in a pretty badass way and she's like, no, you'll never go into jail. I'm going to step forward, and like she gets her daggers out and basically makes a move to suggest, I'm just going to slit your throat and we're going to be done with it. Jory steps forward, Bram steps forward a bit, and Scarlet Briar, even though she's in downstate, has like all this technology and cool stuff about her, I suppose. And she does this big explosion thing that knocks those 2 characters at the front really far back and they're injured. This is a good example of where Guild Wars 2's execution of its stories could be a lot better. Even with all of my sound stuff up on the cutscene, it was really kind of poorly done in my opinion. For something so significant for the story here, these 2 characters actually get seriously injured in this move from Scarlet, blowing them backwards. The way that the cutscene does it, it just doesn't really make it look that realistic at all. It doesn't look anything more serious than whatever else they've ever done in cutscenes. But Bram's been knocked back and broken his leg, which I actually don't think is too serious of an injury, but Rox turns around and says, oh no, that's it, I'm definitely not going to go and kill Scarlet now, she's right there, we're about to end all of this, but because Bram's broke his leg, no, that's it, I'm out. So Rox decides to stay, which was a little bit hard to swallow, and you find out Marjorie actually looks severely injured, like she's basically dead injured. Rox doesn't make any note of that at the time, which is important, and I'll come back to in a second, but this is actually pretty serious, and this is where it makes a bit of a turn, and suddenly things get really good. Casimir obviously is in love with Marjorie. They fully established it a couple of patches ago. These 2 are in love, and she has that moment. Like, I've been pushing for this for a while. I really wanted a character to die, and B, someone to crack, okay? I actually talked about it the other way around. I talked about it, Lady Casimir dying and Marjorie cracking, but no, it happens the other way around, and it's all the more sweet. Casimir, like, goes a bit nuts. The cutscene ends, they play some cool music in the background, and Lady Casimir charges Scarlet. She also says something along the lines of, oh, sweet Dwayna, please help Marjorie, which I think was a cool line as well, given that she's a human and they mention Dwayna. But yeah, then you're suddenly back in control. Casimir's charging Scarlet, and it's your job to make sure, like, Casimir doesn't die in this fight between these 2 women, just, like, duking it out over there. Scarlet from the floor, but still putting up a fight. And Casimir just going ape with all of her mesmery abilities. This was really nice to see as well. The profession that Casimir has chosen actually has a bit of an impact at this moment in the story. She's creating all these different clones of herself to goad Scarlet and frustrate her. Anyway, it's your job as the player, and I think this is important. A lot of people want to be the guy that kills Scarlet. They don't want another thing like Cormier or like Traherne where someone else gets all the credit. You want to be the one to finish this character off, and indeed that's your opportunity right now. This is how you end the entire story. Before anything else happens between Casimir and Scarlet as they're trying to fight and stuff, you need to get in there and execute a stomp on Scarlet. Now, there's an achievement for doing this really, really quickly. I missed the achievement. I wasn't really aware it existed at the start, but I'm happy with that because the longer it takes you to actually be able to stomp Scarlet out, the more story you get, basically. But Scarlet's got, like, this shield that she puts around herself, and you can only stomp her if you execute a stomp in the perfect window of opportunity while she's trying to kill Casimir, who's creating all of these clones. Casimir, by the way, as I say, she's sort of cracked. She starts, like, really taunting Scarlet. Scarlet's real name being Kiara, right, that we did hear about finally in game a couple of patches ago, but this was a big part of Scarlet. You know, she shed that name. She didn't want anything to do with it, and Casimir knows, so Casimir's like going, Kiara, Kiara. It's really, really well done with the music in the background as well, and I had like a really odd moment where I realized I'm so invested in what's going on with these characters and not even paying attention to what I'm doing as a player. And as a player, I'm just like scrambling around trying to evade all these grenades and things, desperately trying to stomp Scarlet even though it's futile to get through her shield. And that was a really, really cool moment to realize that the game had put me to this point. Anyway, eventually, Casimir will explain, look, the shield goes down when Scarlet's attacking. Make sure you do it in the right time. You realize you execute the stomp, whatever finisher you may have equipped is the finisher that will come out on Scarlet. For me, it was my Shark, but I feel like I should have changed it perhaps to something else. Though Shark's a pretty cool finisher anyway. And I also feel like there should be a hidden achievement. I mentioned this before. There should so be a hidden achievement in the game where you can stomp Scarlet with like your Watchwork tonic on. So it's like she's been stomped by a Watchwork Knight. That'd be so cool. Come on. But yeah, so you get to stomp Scarlet and you really do feel like basically, yeah, I was the one to kill her. And that's the end of Scarlet Brighter. So I take your minds back to the point where she says, oh, don't you want to know why I did it, or my motivation, stuff like this, and Bram just like slaps her down and says, no, it doesn't matter. You know, that's pretty sour to me. I wanted at least some kind of conversation with Scarlet, some human side seen specifically from her rather than from journals and third-party sources, and we just didn't get that. So Scarlet's now dead. Lady Casimir runs back to where Bram, Rox, Marjorie are, and it turns out that Rox had just healed Marjorie up. It's never really been established that Rox has a capacity for healing people, and even in the cutscene earlier, Rox was only showing concern for Bram's broken leg rather than anything to do with Marjorie. And I'm not saying that it's out of character for Rox to care about Marjorie, but for such a significant thing, for the players to think that Marjorie is dead to, oh no, she's not dead because of Rox, and then to have not really even suggested that Rox was looking at her before, I think is a mistake. So Marjorie is actually okay. Rox has healed her up and she will recover just fine. This is a pretty cool double bluff. See, you remember the spoilers that came out in the community? One of the biggest spoilers that not too many people caught on, I will say, but some people did catch on with, was the idea that a main character was going to die, that Marjorie was going to die. And indeed, Marjorie does not die in this patch. There's a small moment during the story, which I do think is worthwhile, by the way. I really like the double bluff, and I like what it did to Casimir's character just for that short period. But Marjorie didn't die fully. I do think that the devs should eventually kill a character properly. I don't think they should be scared of it, but I'm not too disappointed that Marjorie has survived, at least for now. There's plenty more opportunity to kill characters off later on down the line. Anyway, so Marjorie's fine. This is the second cutscene that begins now. All I really have to say about this cutscene, this is where everybody makes sure that they're okay. Marjorie and Casimir actually have a kiss, which is a bit odd, feels a little bit out of place, but it's okay. And actually, I applaud that second cutscene because this was execution done quite well. If you rewatch this cutscene, it should be there in the footage in the background. The animations, the movement of the characters, though not amazing, is actually far better than we often see they do in Guild Wars 2. You know, actually having these two characters hold one another and kiss one another, that's technically speaking not something the devs have done often, and it's nice to see that they did that there. And it's one of those small things that I'm picking up on personally and thinking, right, hopefully Season 2 of The Living World has a lot more of this stuff, because allowing characters to interact with one another in these ways is going to be much more liberating for the stories that they want to tell. So they have a kiss, and before you get a moment to do anything else, the final cutscene begins, where the drill finishes its job, because of course Scarlet's dead, but the drill is still going. This is one of those painterly cutscenes. It's like where we saw the Tower of Nightmares falling down. It's like the dungeon cutscenes, and it's the thing that everybody's basically raving about. I'm going to show that to you guys right now as footage on the screen with all the original audio. Hope you enjoy it. Again, this is big spoilers, but we'll watch it there, and then I will talk to you guys about what we're seeing just after. Okay, so we start off with a shot with Scarlet's body, which is already decomposing very quickly, by the way, I quite like. But there's this big shot of a giant blue light beam coming out of Lion's Arch and is visible from, you know, a lot of Kryta, presumably most of Gendaran Fields, this second shot. And we see this blue light starts cracking its way through the ground. My understanding of the cutscene is this is one very specific blue light, and it's actually showing us the direction of one of the ley lines underground that has just now been tampered with and disrupted in some way. And we're following where it's moving to. The line of blue light goes to the Thormanova reactor. I really liked this shot. You know, they've got some sort of scenic environmental shots in this cutscene that aren't of anywhere in particular, but this is definitely the Thormanova reactor. And what's very interesting about this shot here is they are showing a parallel between this giant blue light that's just appeared in Lion's Arch is the exact same blue light that we've been seeing since the launch of the game, shining out of the destroyed Thormanova reactor. Of course, this area is significant for the story. Scarlet was looking at this place as the Inquest were originally researching it. It's sort of where some of, you know, this big stuff began, especially the ley lines research. That's where it began for Scarlet. And so we see it's connected here to the ley line at the Thormanova reactor. And then it goes beyond the Thormanova reactor. And we see a shot of a jungle-type area. Is this Caledon Forest? Is this somewhere perhaps in Metrica? Or is it somewhere in Brisbane? Or, more likely, in my opinion, is this somewhere we haven't actually got to play? Is this new terrain, areas of the Guild Wars universe we haven't seen before? Or perhaps just areas that we haven't seen since Guild Wars 1, like the Magus Falls, or some of those areas in the Tarnished Coast we haven't been able to go back to. The ley line zigs along into this jungly area, stops, goes deep underground, we follow it, and there is a shot of a monster opening its mouth. That's what we see, okay? There is nothing in-game after this point that tells us what this thing is that we're seeing. However, within the community, everybody's basically saying it, and it's been confirmed by devs that the thing we are seeing, waking up beneath the jungle, everybody's immediately obviously going to assume it's a dragon. Some people thought it was the deep sea dragon, even though he's already been awake, but people thought it could have been the deep sea dragon because it looks kind of watery. Yeah, that's just the way the cutscene kind of does it. What we're seeing waking up is the jungle dragon, Mordramoth. That is the story, basically, of Season 2 of The Living World. Now, many of you are familiar with the fact that I knew what was happening with The Living World. This was sort of one of the big reveals. This was one of the things that I've known for a while now. Had to keep tight-lipped on. I will probably do an entire video dedicated on real, legitimate speculation, because now, like, we're basically all caught up together on where the story can go from here. But I did want to talk about the idea of the way this character was revealed. You know, in truth, what are we seeing? There's nothing that confirms that's Mordramoth there. Nothing at all. So after I watched this cutscene while playing this patch, I was like, wait, what? Can I talk about what this is? Or are they just setting up a question of what it is? However, I guess it's enough for ArenaNet to assume that now they can announce it. There was a post on the forums where someone said, what is this we're seeing? And someone else responded, hey, it's Mordramoth. And they specifically said, oh, it's Mordramoth. How the hell could Colin Johansson have thought this was a 1 in a million speculation theory? Everybody was expecting something like this. To which Colin then himself responded by saying, I made that statement a long time ago when a lot of people thought it could have been Primordus, or there was still a lot of speculation about time travel and stuff in the story, and so I do think it was a valid thing to say, and I sort of agree with him there. But this is the way, this roundabout conversation in a forum thread, this is the way that we have gained legitimacy to this theory and this idea. Like, I don't know, it's kind of a sticky situation for the devs to be in. Like, what do? Add text at the bottom of the cutscene saying, you are seeing Mordramoth waking up. You know, how do they do it? There's no character that necessarily would have seen this. There's no easy way to let people know. But it is curious to me, and it was sort of a weird situation for me to be in. Like, is this meant to be a mystery or not? I'm pretty sure it is canon. Obviously, I'll have my head chopped off if it's not. But this is Mordramoth. It's kind of interesting as well, I think, knowing that it's Mordramoth, that the shot they give us, I was always expecting like an eye to open underground, sort of like how we saw Primordus's eye open, or anytime there's ever a dragon waking up like Smaug in The Hobbit, whatever, there's always the dragon eye opening. Instead, they did its mouth opening up, and, you know, you might think, oh, that's just a minor twist on it, but actually, what's one of the key things, the key thing that ever told us what Mordramoth's name was long ago, right back at launch, when the original theories of a jungle dragon were coming out, what was it? It was in a skill that Subject Alpha used called the Teeth of Mordramoth, and what are we seeing in the cutscene? The Teeth of Mordramoth. I thought that was quite cool. So yeah, that is basically the big reveal at the end of the story. Scarlet Briar is dead. We know her full story now. She was being possessed by strange voices in her head. These were the voices put in her head by Morgemoth. This has implications on theories about, you know, are the Sylvari somehow minions of the Elder Dragon that were swayed away because of the Ventari tablet? Stuff like that. I will probably be talking quite openly and speculating with you guys once again about that in future videos. But that's the big reveal, and I would love you guys to leave comments and let me know what you actually think about that. You excited, Morgemoth? I know a lot of people do want us to return to Elder Dragons, but were you maybe expecting us to return to a previous Elder Dragon? I mean, there were already a bunch for the picking for us to go and fight, and this is the one we're going to do. But some confirmation on that, and some real backstory behind the Sylvari is kind of nice. I remember one of the key writers of the Living World, you know, panning it out and designing the narrative and stuff, she talked about how she loves the Sylvari, and they're like one of her favourite races. And it doesn't surprise me then that, like, this person was given an opportunity, hey, we're doing Living World, we need some story for the future, that she thought, hey, let's do this thing with Morgemoth, people like Elder Dragons, let's do that, and it gives us, you know, all these excuses to deal with more stuff to do with the Sylvari. It does make sense to me, and of course this does mean, practically speaking, for Season 2, what are we going to be seeing? Probably a lot of new areas. Do you guys remember how they were talking about, like, the broken portals and things, and how we've got that big fort in the Brisbane Wildlands leading deeper into the Maguma jungle? How in the novels there are icons marking the locations of all the dungeons in the game, plus 2 extra dungeons for some reason out in the Maguma jungle that we can't get to in game. All these things, perhaps now, like Bloodstone Fen, we could be going back there. All these places could be on the table for Season 2 of the Living World, and a return to the idea of the Elder Dragons. So yeah, a couple of other things with the patch. Once you're done with all that, the drill, like, becomes unstable and you all decide to get out of dodge. You can interact with a few panels in there, sort of to try and deduce exactly what's going on. You can make a couple of observations. Observation number 1 is that Scarlet wasn't trying to tap energy from the ley lines. She was just trying to disrupt them, which she managed to do. Observation number 2 is that Timey was indeed correct, that this whole idea with the ley lines was the true theory, and that was the answer to basically what was going on. And observation number 3 is that you cannot shut off the drill. Maybe an engineer of some kind should be able to. I thought that was then hinting that we'd have Timey come on the airship, because Timey's just, like, throughout this entire patch, she's got that obsession with Scarlet that wasn't explored that much. By the way, the whole Kaith and Scarlet thing hasn't been explored that much either. That's Season 2 stuff coming forward. But Timey's just been locked out, and that's interesting to me, and I was like, oh, maybe this is Timey's chance to come in and, you know, disable the Breachmaker or something. But it turns out that quote, an engineer would probably know more about how to shut it down. If you are playing as an engineer in-game, you get a different dialogue window, which is really cool. And it basically says, oh, Scarlet doesn't want people to shut it down, and I'm not smart enough to do it. So once you have left the Breachmaker, you get all your rewards, stuff like that. You can now go to all the different characters dotted around the place. There's nothing in the dead end bar, unfortunately, though it sounds like maybe there should be another instance that appears there at some point. You can go and speak to the other characters. You can speak to Captain Magnus, who thanks you for the work you've done. It explains that Scarlet's minions are still about in Lion's Arch, and you'll have to deal with them. It plays like this sound effect where everybody's cheering for you. You can go and speak to Evan Nashblade, and he says, oh, you're the grunt that killed Scarlet Briar. Am I meant to be impressed? Which I think is an awesome line of dialogue. I think that's so cool, because it's so true. It's like, we weren't really alone the ones that mortally wounded Scarlet or did any of the attack back into Lion's Arch. We didn't do that alone. We were just the last person to finish it off, and yeah, we did it at sort of a clutch moment, I suppose, but it's not that impressive, and I love that Evan is just so blunt about it. You can then go speak to Timey as well. You can explain that Scarlet Briar is dead, but all in all, it's just a little bit of wrap up. It seems to me that we'll probably get other minor bits of story slowly seeped into the client while we're waiting for Season 2 to begin. It seems odd to me that they would just suddenly cut it hard. Do you guys remember when the Tower of Nightmares ended? They did like some ninja patches or whatever that just quietly moved the locations of characters around in the background without formally having, you know, like a big Tuesday patch. I'm expecting stuff like that to happen over the next couple of weeks, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. I've been talking for 39 minutes. I don't know how much of this is going to get cut out. That's the patch in a nutshell. I do have a lot more that I want to say to you guys. I can finally talk to you guys as well about all the things that ArenaNet had talked to me about a while ago. We can all get on the same page, and, you know, big speculation stuff can come in the future. I'd love to hear your initial ideas, though, whether people enjoyed it or not, and what you think about the whole Morgemoth thing. But until then, guys, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let's talk about Season 1 of Living World, and I will see you next time.